some examples of employee ideas in terms of the disruptive. One of my favorite stories is Amazon Prime. You would normally think that Amazon Prime would come from a employee in the marketing department. It actually came from a software engineer through a suggestion program that Amazon has had in place since its inception. Second reason around the justification for why to do this is employees closest to a product or process often have the best insights on how to improve it. This is just an example from one of our customers, exam one. So they were able to save 1.4 million in 6 months across about 35 different ideas that were implemented. They always, once again, don't need to be groundbreaking ideas. There's a lot of quick wins out there, especially if you don't run these types of programs currently in your organization. The last piece, which always hits home, and no matter what your use cases or what types of ideas you're trying to collect, it's always around engagement. You want to increase engagement of either employees, customers, suppliers. This is specifically related to employees. So 30% of workers strongly agree that their opinions seem to count, according to Gallup. And by increasing this percentage to 30 to 60, so doubling it, they projected from this Gallup survey, there would be a 27% reduction in turnover, 40% reduction in safety incidents, and a 12% increase in productivity. Just kind of putting rubber to the road. So Squaw Valley Alpine Meadows is another one of our customers. They actually saw, according to McKinsey's Organizational Health Index, a 74% increase in employee engagement in terms of the learning and engagement metric in that survey over a 6-month period. And really, it was just around making employees feel like their voice was heard within the organization. Now, I know everybody wants COVID-19 to be over. These are just some of the ways, and we'll share out these slides afterwards, just some thought starters on ways that we've seen IdeaWake used. And just in general, if it goes beyond IdeaWake, as we'll cover, there's several different ways that you can run innovation challenges. You don't need to do it on a dedicated tool. In the past, some of the common formats that you would see ideation or innovation, what you call like a design thinking workshop, right? A lot of these formats had gone through hackathons and Shark Tanks in person, design thinking workshops in person, and then always like online campaigns and challenges. As I'm sure everybody's aware at this point, over the last 18 months, these two options have been widely unavailable, although they are starting to open back up. Which really just left a huge influx in demand for running these campaigns online, because innovation, right, even simple process improvement in order to address some of the crazy operational changes that were happening was needed, and it was needed immediately. So that's where the online format comes into play. Going into our next section here, which is just defining what innovation challenges are and what they're not, and also helping you scope out how to create what we call challenge statements. We define innovation challenges as the process of rapidly collecting, prioritizing, and testing/implementing ideas from frontline employees. And the main 3 points here is that they're targeted around a specific topic that is related to an organizational goal. That's the first piece of talking about the deliverables with business lines, making sure that you have some foresight and like partner specifically with a business line up front and understand what their goals are, and how those actually relate to overarching organizational goals so that there's budget with the ideas that you would bring to that business unit. It has a defined process to evaluate and select ideas, what we would call a workflow, so that we can communicate where ideas are going and why after the campaign ends. And it's time-based, so it's not always open. We could do an entire session on why you would do time-based challenges versus doing always open submission. They can work in tandem. It's just by doing these time-based challenges and following these 3, golden rules, you're going to get more ideas, higher quality ideas, and be able to build momentum for your program and justify its existence longer term. This is just another way of looking at that, at the process, right, for how these are run. Once again, the context, a lot of what we're talking about today is employees internally. The system and these types of initiatives can just as easily be turned out externally to customers, partners, startups, et cetera. But they involve, right, a process of either, you have a process to intake ideas, what we would call crowdsource. You'll have some type of collaboration internally where people can elevate each other's ideas by commenting and voting. And then leadership selection, ultimately leading to validation and implementation, which is a lot of the time where people are going to falter. In order to create effective challenge statements, we have two different methods that we can follow. It's not rocket science, but once again, the main theme and the main point that I want to get across, if you take nothing else away from today, is making sure that the challenge statement that you're going after, or series of challenge statements, ties to an organizational goal, but then specifically a department that you're actively partnering with and has given you some type of buy-in to take on the ideas that come out of the actual challenge. How we do this is list short and long-term objectives. You loop in that business unit, right, or the leadership team in order to help create these. You're going to try to identify some type of specifics in terms of scope and time frame. You combine those two things together, and those create a challenge statement. So in a manufacturing line environment, right, we want to reduce scrap always. We want to do it by a specific metric, which is 5%. That would just be formed into this type of question. You don't need to always do it based upon like a percentage or a dollar amount. You can always think about like patient journey in healthcare's case, or customer journey. So reducing patient anxiety before care happens, during the care experience, and then after care takes place. Once again, we'll share these out just as resources. These are some nice just thought starters for you that you can reference here. Going into our next section is, hey, now we have our challenge statement. What do we do in order to communicate and promote participation in order to get to that 60 to 80% engagement rate? First and foremost, it's coming up with a dedicated communication plan. And I'll cover what the unique branding piece means in a moment. It's the unique branding. A is nice to have. B, C, and D are incredibly important. D is the most important. And I would say 75% of people that we see have issues with D. And it's the number one reason that their program, if they run a second challenge, has lower engagement than the first. For online promotion methods, everything from company e-newsletters, featuring on your intranet if you have one, doing some dedicated pre-launch emails, TV slideshows. We'll get into that in a moment, like some examples. But for the dedicated pre-launch emails, you'll see that this is just an example of one of our customers, just very good in terms of the branding behind the program. A lot of folks will call it Ideas Lab, Innovation Lab, something to that effect. But it has its own branding, its own logo. And then we're focused on employee empowerment, keeping it simple instead of having like something that would be the equivalent of like 3 pages of text that's often drawn up by communications teams, and then tells you why you should participate. Just a pro tip, if it's signed by the CEO or whatever the highest level in the organization you can get sign off from, and it's signed from that individual, it will help increase the open rate as well as the click-through rate. For company e-newsletters and intranet, it's just collaborating with IT. This says IdeaWake. It could just as easily be any other tool or a form that you're using. Try to get it as much prevalence in the organization where people are already going. We call it your organization's DNA. Find out where people are, what touch points that folks are going to go throughout the day, and try to just hook into those different mechanisms or those different locations. Especially when you do time-based challenges, it's a lot easier to ask IT to put up a link for a period of a month and make it more prominent versus having it always there throughout the entire year. So some more online promotion methods. I know offline has been off the table over the last 18 months, but you can actually share some of these offline promotional materials online. This is just another example of having some unique branding for a program. Once again, keeping it simple. We suggest trying to keep everything to the rule of threes. I know some of this stuff is just really 101 type information, but it is always good to highlight. Things have run the gamut in terms of what we've seen from folks when we get started. So last piece, this is always incredibly effective, even now in an online environment. There have been a lot more Zoom meetings or Teams meetings. There's fatigue from it a lot of the time, but just hooking into the existing cadence of those meetings and having the highest level of the organization, if it's like a CEO all hands meeting that happens once a month, making sure that you try to align the kickoff to that actual event. Once again, just hooking into the events and the organizational DNA that already exists in terms of communications internally. Last piece to this is weekly and monthly department meetings. So while the program is live, same exact thing as the previous slide. It's just looking at managers, frontline managers, instead of looking to the CEO or executive office. The number one driver of engagement that we found, but also one of the hardest things to execute on, is what we call champion networks. So champion networks are simply a group of people that will have come in and participate early. If you have your idea, if you want everyone to participate and be able to see each other's ideas and, do any type of voting around those ideas, building out a champion network and having them post some initial ideas, but also be our boots on the ground to promote the program is going to be incredibly valuable. I would say about 25% of the folks that we work with will do the champion network effectively. It's not a requirement. Your challenge will still work. It's just with the level of effort you're already going to put in to run one of these up front, especially if it's going company-wide and you're talking about 1,000+ people. It's often very helpful to build out one of these champion networks. Normally what we'll do is segment them depending upon the number of folks we're trying to engage by either department, location, or both. If you're a 160,000 person company in 28 countries, it's going to be difficult to do it by department and location. That's like hundreds and hundreds of people. Oftentimes we'll just do it by region and have that person be responsible for the promotion of the program and helping get the word out to their respective departments within that region. Champion network responsibilities kind of covered this already, but the number one thing is promoting participation. If you have a more open system, it would be helping seed initial ideas. Nobody wants to be first. So if you have a campaign that you're running and people can see each other's ideas, if there are no ideas when you go live, nobody wants to be the first to share. So it's actually one of the easiest ways you can guarantee that you're going to increase the number of ideas that you get, because everyone that is excited to participate is going to come in right away, but then they're going to hit the barrier of like, oh, I don't want to be the first to share. So helping seed ideas, promote participation, and then also helping comment and vote on ideas. Once again, if you have a more open program where you have folks able to see each other's ideas in the system. Just a couple of other tidbits we've seen from A/B testing. So all communication should focus on empowering employees with a voice. And another tip that we've just found is avoid overusing the term innovation. So you can call, literally the topic of this talk is innovation challenges, right? But folks, we've seen a lot in terms of the differential around engagement when you use the terminology of innovation versus ideas or suggestions. We don't have it's statistically significant in terms of the impact on click-through rates when we did the study. But one thing that we can, infer out of it is that people don't necessarily see themselves as innovative. A lot more people see themselves as having ideas or suggestions to improve the organization. All right, we're about halfway through so far. So next section is designing evaluation criteria and incentives. The workflow or the workflow is the process that we move ideas through, right? So the steps within the process from when we collect ideas, when we select and ultimately hand them off to business units to have them implemented. What we want to make sure of, I've mentioned this before, I'll mention it probably 2 or 3 more times, that we have our evaluation criteria tie back to the goals of the organization that you set at the beginning of your challenge, either with senior leadership or with the department or business unit that you're partnering with. Engaging the business unit in the evaluation process for the folks not just that are responsible for green lighting idea, giving the okay to move forward with an idea, but the ones who will be responsible for validation and implementation of the actual idea itself. I might have to wait till the end to go. I have a slide that I'll share that's not in this presentation, but it does a really nice job of the breakout of who you want to involve in the evaluation process in order to make the handoffs much easier. So let's see, metrics. So keep the number of evaluation criteria at a minimum of 3 and a maximum of 10. I would say 5, depending upon if you want senior leadership to go and do this. If you have 10 criteria, it's going to be very difficult to get senior leadership or anyone actually, from what we found, to complete it based on all 10. Especially for your early challenges, highly suggest focusing on ideas that are easy to implement and have a high potential impact. This stands even if the purview of your program is to build out disruptive innovation. And by disruptive, it's like new products and services that, are new business models or brand new ways of thinking in the organization. We call it the walk, run, scale model. even if your long-term goal is to get to building out those new products and services, by going through the motions of starting small and getting some quick wins implemented and communicating those back to the organization, it's going to pay incredible dividends in terms of getting engagement and improving quality of ideas over time. Incentivizing participation. So there's several different ways you can incentivize participation. This is just one of our resources. We have a bunch of freebies that anybody that is interested can just reach out to us afterwards. But we break it down into monetary and non-monetary. Amazon Echo Dots used to be super popular. Dinner at local restaurant or trips used to be as well. Not so much recently, but non-monetary prizes, they don't need to be based upon money. You could do company holiday party, like, shout out, one-on-one meeting with CEO or director, your direct supervisor. There are several ways you can get, crafty and inventive with this. And then 2 pro tips, actually involving idea submitters and testing and validation is something where millennials especially today, are driving to have experience outside of their core job function or role. This is one way that you can do that, is getting them out of the regular 9 to 5 and giving them the opportunity to work on something unique that they came up with is going to help increase their engagement measurably. And we actually have a lot of stats to prove that, which is awesome. Second pro tip, and ultimately, no matter what, in order for your program to be successful long-term, right? Everybody at the end of the day, just to put it candidly, right? Everybody's looking to grow personally and professionally, right? Throughout life. And with that, a lot of the time, what we measure, right? And what we are seen as being measured upon in our quarterly reviews is going to drive what we do in our regular working lives. So just like if you want to make safety, right, one of the metrics to improve in your organization, you're measuring that, you're measuring safety incidents. You want to have a measurement on number of ideas folks are sharing, or, right, it could start off with number of ideas or number of implemented ideas over time, literally by employee in the organization, and having that be on their balanced scorecard in their quarterly reviews is the ultimate, pasture that we're trying to get to in the long term. And the sooner that you can do it, the easier the rest of the process is going to be for you. That kind of ties right into making ideas happen. So we run this challenge, we collect, tens, hundreds, or thousands of ideas, and we narrow them down to top 15 or 20. So now that we have all these great ideas, what do we do to actually turn them into reality? This goes into the question about I'm going to actually look over here. For the first question we received around the deliverables with business lines. In order to set your program up for success, we kind of have this matrix here. We want to understand company-wide goals in terms of KPIs, not just high level, like we want to increase engagement, but what are the metrics behind engagement and how are those measured? We want to understand what the short-term business unit goals are in terms of KPIs, and then what your actual program goals are. If you don't have a formal program yet, it's going to be, what is the goal of the innovation, this first innovation challenge that we're going to be running in terms of hard KPIs. And that could be as simple as number of ideas, potential cost savings, potential new product ideas. It runs the gamut in terms of what the KPIs could be. It's just making sure, like, ultimately we want to have alignment between all 3 of these. Often what happens when we start talking to organizations when they're onboarding, 9 times out of 10, there is a mismatch between company-wide goals and the innovation challenge or program's goals. This goes right into it. So business units, right, when we want to partner with them, they're looking to hit quarterly and annual operational KPIs, right? Their scorecard, what they're being measured on, what's going to determine if they get a bonus or determine if they get a raise or a promotion, are driven off of their operational KPIs. Our innovation program goals, a lot of the time, are looking at longer term horizon projects. So when we bring this to, right, our business unit, the implications of that is they're going to see us as another thing to do versus being a value add to their short-term or medium-term goals, which once again determine their promotion, their bonus, or their raise. For our innovation program to be successful, we're going to have to partner with those business units, right? They're the ones that are going to pilot the things that we come up with and go out of the innovation challenge. They're the ones that are going to take the successful pilots, right? The things that are tested at a small scale and scale them across the organization and ultimately create the impact that we're looking for. So we need to reframe, and instead of being seen as another thing to do, that's not going to help them, we need to reframe that, and it's going to help us significantly in terms of the uphill climb to get things done. So in order to get to our destination, once again, ideally, right, you are able to be in one. Once again, the world is not perfect. We very rarely see where there's actual alignment between these three. Oftentimes, you're actually going to have to start in two, which sounds counterintuitive, simply because what you want in terms of the program's goals here, you need to start focusing on things that are operational, or at least have that be a piece of the goal in order to make sure that you have enough momentum and you can get some things implemented to justify running another one of these challenges in the future. To put this into action, we have like a scorecard that we can send over to you, but it's just listing off the different departments or business units in the organization. And then what you do is look at what is the alignment between your program and their short-term KPIs, their long-term KPIs, and the specific leadership team support within that specific department. That's going to give you a total on department alignment. Then if we go here, in terms of the totals, you're looking at company-wide alignment between your goals short-term and long-term as a program. And then this bottom metric here, over time, you want that to have a higher a closer alignment. Once again, oftentimes, like I'd say at least 6, 7 times out of 10, there is low alignment between organizational goals and why the innovation program exists in the first place, which is something that you definitely want to address, if not within the first year that you have the program live. So over time, your short and long-term goals are going to look different. So initially, it's building buzz and quick wins that enables you to help make business units happy and achieve their initial goals, which unlocks more funding and better relationships, breaking down silos, if you will, in order to create those relationships to actually achieve the innovation program's goals longer term. That allows you ultimately to prove the recurring larger financial value of the program instead of having it die on the vine, to put it candidly, while we're trying to skip past this step. 3 different formats for implementation. So we want to start once again with lower risk, less complex projects, and then expand that over time. This is the incremental disruptive transformational has fallen out of favor over the last year and a half, understandably, but once again, we want to not run before we can walk. We can still use incremental disruptive and transformational in order to add context for this conversation. If we start here, though, it's going to allow us to unlock what we need to do the run and scale, the funding, the resources, and the people and the relationships. Ultimately, most programs are going to end here. They're going to be not end, but the purview and the goal of the program is to be disruptive, not transformational. This is another metric or graphic that we'll share with everybody after the conversation here. It just breaks out the high-level metrics between walk, run, and scale, what we're focused on, right, our primary goals in each one of those, and just a roadmap, if you will, on what you want to focus on and how to unlock the next phase. This normally goes in 12-month cycles. So, if you look at it's almost 2022, believe it or not. So you look at 2022 for the walk, 2023 for the run. And most people, like I said, will stick in this run format. But then you'd look to 2024 for scale. Looking at best practices, common obstacles, and taking action for the last section before we open it up for more questions. We've covered a lot of these, but just kind of to recap, you want your challenges to be targeted and agile, as well as time-based. You want to make sure to communicate not just before, but during and after, most importantly, the campaign or the challenge ends. We suggest making it cross-functional. If you go over 5,000 people, you're going to see a lower engagement rate, depending on your company size. But making it cross-functional, there's a lot of benefits in terms of the cross-functional collaboration that can happen between different business teams. And then making sure, once again, that things are formalized. So having a process, once ideas are submitted, know where those ideas are going to go. It's going to help you determine who you want to actually loop into the conversation in terms of who's going to evaluate things and select things before you take things live. I already addressed some of these up front, right? But some of the challenges that we just, lack of engagement, lack of ROI, prioritization of features and IT resources. I'll just touch on this really quickly. For the IT resources, everything these days touches IT. you're not going to be able to protect IT time for the first one of these campaigns that you're running. So it's going to have to be an ad hoc budget. What we suggest over time, as you're doing the incremental projects and building up the quick wins and justifying the ROI of the program, that's when you'll start to be able to go into unlocking more IT resources and actually getting dedicated budget and time. We have seen it done. It's, really just going through the steps versus trying to just get protected IT time for the first one of these campaigns that you're running. Common tactical mistakes. Making participation too complex in general. I have this idea of posting. Like, we see some companies come in and they have 15 different fields that they're trying to have submitters actually enter in order to participate. Keep it simple in the beginning, add complexity over time after an initial screening of the ideas, as an example. Not providing recognition and feedback, / not updating employees on the status of their ideas. The bottom right here is easily the biggest mistake that we see. Once the initiative's over, right, those ideas get handed to business units and then they kind of fall into the abyss. The number one reason that employees stop sharing ideas, according to that 2021 State of Employee Ideas survey that we did, was because they did not hear feedback on a previous idea that they shared. It was 20%. It's like 20.25 or something percent. So it's literally 1 in 5 employees who had ideas said that they stopped sharing ideas because they didn't hear feedback on a previous one. So it's very simple. If you have a dedicated platform in place, there's plenty of great ones out there. It's going to allow you to automate a lot of that process so that you don't, go against your own program's best interest after the campaign ends. Literally have that right here on the next slide. Other reasons, right, not receiving recognition. These top 2 tie into just simple communication after the program's over. If you can personalize that communication, that would be phenomenal. In closing, 95% of the ideas that you receive are not going to get implemented. It's closer to 98% most likely, depending upon how large your organization is. But employees, what we found from that same survey as well as other studies, employees don't care as much about whether their idea is implemented as much as they care about whether they have a perceived voice, which ties directly back into their idea not falling into a black hole and then receiving recognition for sharing in the first place. Some of the different mechanisms or tools that you can use for running challenges. If you're just getting started, you don't have any budget and you're under 50 participants, you can use something like Google Forms or Microsoft Forms internally or externally for the participation. So internal being employees, external being customers, suppliers, or startups. You can, if you're doing internal only and under 50 people, you can use, we've seen Slack, Microsoft Teams. As soon as you go over 50 participants and open the floodgates, it just becomes unruly, let's say, when you're trying to manage all this using traditional methods. That's where a dedicated platform like IdeaWake, which we obviously offer, or like I said, there's other platforms out there as well. There's plenty of great ones. That's where we would come into play. My main piece of advice would be, once again, just make sure that there is a plan and dedicated time from communications and intern, whoever it is, to send out communications, if you use these 2 methods, to everybody after the challenge ends, telling them why their idea didn't move forward or why it did. With that, just have a couple of freebies and resources for everyone. So we have a launch checklist and launch plan based on the hundreds and hundreds of launches that we've done. We've put together just a bunch of resources that take you from, I want to launch a program, to building buy-in and taking the program live and having it be successful. That's the launch checklist and launch plan. Also offering 30 days access to our new rewritten platform for anyone who's interested and giving it a test drive. So with that, going to open it up to questions, and we can start with, I think, Tommy, some of the ones that were already asked here. And thank you all so much for the time.
Oh, that was great, Coby. A lot of covering a lot of ground in a short period of time. Great presentation. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, catch your breath. So we're going to open it up to questions here just momentarily, and I'll go ahead and kind of kick it off with just, I guess, a curiosity. And you touched on this towards the end of the presentation, which is kind of the purpose and the reasoning for running an innovation challenge, right? At the end here, you started to get into some of the other, I don't know, I'll say softer reasons for running an idea challenge, right? We covered a lot of reasons at the beginning that were maybe harder around business unit goals and overall organizational goals and kind of harder metrics and KPIs. And then towards the end there, we started to get into, let's just say maybe more cultural and culture building reasons. So, looking at those two, big buckets, I know there's lots of other reasons why you would run an innovation challenge, but, in your experience, how many of these organizations are running challenges to really address business unit ideas, and or how many are just running these challenges to kind of build culture and to build community and things of that nature? So I'm just kind of curious what you're seeing in terms of, the reasons for corporates running these challenges.
Definitely. That's a great question, Tommy. So, overall, I'd say 25% of folks will run them just for employee engagement, and that's their only metric that they're trying to measure. About the 75 fall into, hey, there's always the underlying tone of we want to increase employee engagement, but we're going to be measuring metrics that go beyond employee engagement. So those, cost savings, error rate reduction, safety improvements in the continuous improvement realm. And then if you're doing new products and services, it's, simple metric is what I really liked one of our customers. It's we want to introduce 2 new things to customers every year through the innovation program. You start there. It's simple. And those things have to be like a new product or service that you're offering to customers, or at least piloting. Over time, what you can translate that into is percentage of new sales from products or services that come from those 1 to 2 per year.
Right. Yeah, I imagine in some cases, you'll start out with looking for, metrics and RI and maybe the harder, KPIs. And then, as a bonus, you're getting cultural engagement and employee engagement is kind of a byproduct of this as well. So I'd imagine in some cases you're going to get that also.
Definitely.
Awesome. Thanks for that. So we've got some folks who are wanting to chime in here. So we're just going to open it up to questions here. So feel free to come on and ask your questions. I don't know if I'm going to pronounce your name correctly or not, but Horashu, sorry if I got that name wrong, but feel free to come on and introduce yourself and ask your question.
Hi.
So go ahead.
Hi. So don't worry. Usually people refer to me as I don't know how to pronounce your name. I know it's me, so it's okay. Hi, Coby. Thank you for this presentation. And I would like to understand or to find out or to get answers to some of my questions regarding entrepreneurs, right? I'm an entrepreneur and I'm trying to scale such a program or to build such a program, or at least to leave the milestones, the cornerstones of such a program in an organization where I'm working, right? So my first question is, what would be the attributes of a true blood entrepreneur that should not just post idea, but to continue working on his or other people idea? So from your experience, what's the persona that, doesn't just ideate, but also executes?
That's a great question. So we actually have an entire other solution that we offer that's like an accelerator as a service that does learning and development behind employees who are interested. The characteristics that you're looking for, though, are often going to be people that these are really, really broad, right? If you're interested, we can set up a follow-up conversation. I can show you some statistics as well as like more information on what it would take to set up one of those programs. But you're looking for folks who are going to be ambitious, folks who are looking to get outside of the traditional job role that they have and explore new opportunities outside of what they would do in their 9 to 5. Oftentimes, those aren't necessarily things, by the way, that are getting measured on annual employee engagement surveys, which should be happening at least on a quarterly basis. But that's, once again, another conversation. So I would say you want to find people that are ambitious, looking to do something outside of their traditional job role. And there's a couple questions that you could ask in a survey in order to start to identify who some of those folks would be. Nobody has extra time, especially over the last 18 months. It's been less so, right, than ever before. So that's going to be, everybody's time is always going to be crunched. Really what you want to do is find the people who are going to be go-getters or ambitious and also looking to do things outside of regular role. Is that helpful? At least 40,000.
Yes. Yes, I have other two. And
Okay.
I'm trying to give you some context. So I'm interested also what happens with the entrepreneurs after the program stops, especially in the case when the program is time-based. Because if you want to scale the learning, then you have to produce entrepreneurs, and the organization doesn't know what to do with it, right?
Yeah.
And if you don't want to scale the learning and you just want things to be done, then you can't. I mean, you cannot produce entrepreneurs on like in a factory if you don't know what to do with it. And if you are not and limiting yourself to one team to discover new other ideas and year by year, then you cannot scale. So
that's a great question. So what we find, the output of the program, right, is going to be like when you run one of these and you have an entrepreneurship program, the output is going to be the person just as much as the idea that gets developed by the person in the program. So from what we found from running these, right, and getting pilots actually out to the market that are fully driven and developed by frontline staff, is that when they go back, and our goal and our metric that we like to measure and go for is, out of the people that went through the program, are they taking what they learned from the program of how to think and approach problems back to their everyday working lives and their jobs? So a great example would be a director of IT at a large health system went through the program. It was for building out a price transparency application for consumers. And the program really focuses on thinking customer first. All of these programs around doing like any lean startup methodology, taking an idea and developing it, focuses on how can we be more customer centric or think in the voice of the customer. So what they did when they went back to the director, to their director of IT role, was every IT request asked the question around who is the customer for this, and also how have you validated that this solves a problem for the customer that you just stated. So like every IT request that was submitted had that baked into it, and that's an example of culture of innovation, right? It is actually, you have an event, that event went on for 10 weeks. In 10 weeks, we built out did over 150 customer interviews, dozens of hours of customer observation. They went through and learned the process of identifying who the customer was, the problems that they were solving for the customer, and designing the solution around them. And then they took that back to what they were doing in their everyday job. Is that helpful? I rambled there a bit. But.
No, I'm always asking myself if I was helpful after I'm answering. You were helpful. The thing is, I was not thinking of director of IT, so I was thinking of the person from the lower hierarchy, right, who after feels the taste of innovation, then asks himself why to go back to my business line. What? Right. So, but I got your question. Yeah. And the last one, and I'm sure it will be short, is in the implementation phase of an idea. Do you believe in working 50% for the business line and 50% for the idea contest, or 80 with 20, or do you believe in 100% focus on innovation and that's it?
I believe in whatever you're able to get. Honestly, I've never seen it go beyond 15% time for the initial validation of an idea, because it goes in phases, right? We have 3 different phases that we normally follow. So normally you're not going to see it go beyond 15% protected time for a team member. If you can unlock more of that time, that would be phenomenal. The thing is, though, that you want to make sure that you have the ability to backfill that time from like the manager. So you want to get the manager's buy-in for the employee's time who is going to be allocated towards the project. It just takes some planning. I would try to start with 10% time though. Even at this point, 5%, having it take a little longer to develop the project, just given the environment that we're finding ourselves in today. So yeah, that helpful?
Yes, it is. I don't like the answer, like 5%, to be honest.
Yeah, 5% is brutal, I know, especially, but you could think of it. I'll send over some information to you after this reach out. We look at like 3 different phases in like the program. So you have problem solution fit, which can be done in a matter of like 3 weeks. So it's figuring out what's the problem we solve, who is the customer, does our solution solve the problem, and validating what we call assumptions behind those 3 questions. You can answer those relatively quickly, and then that if you answer yes to all of those and you present it to leadership, it unlocks the next tranche of time, if you will. So it's just time is the most valuable resource that everybody has right now. So it's a matter of just figuring out how to design the program in order to get the leadership buy-in to produce some results. And then you unlock more time right after you prove out the program has value. But that's the thing that we see most of the time, is that folks will try to unlock everything at the very beginning, versus strategically, we just have to get quick wins, or we call them enabling events, that give us the ability to justify existence of program and ultimately then unlock more resources.
Thank you very much. Thanks a lot.
Of course.
All right. Thank you, Coby, for the session and your presentation. Great stuff. Super useful. And thank you, everybody else, for joining us for the session today. See the link in the chat that I think Austin's going to drop in there to join the next session. And please also share your insights from this session with your peers on the community platform. If you have any questions or want to continue this conversation, feel free to add them there. And so that we're going to conclude. Thank you all again for joining us, and enjoy the rest of your day.
Thanks, everybody. Much appreciated.